This bee balm is literally crawling with bees. Wow.
I just thought, a pink onion, why not try it?
Our hostas do well in Minnesota. They like our temperatures.
We have things blooming from early spring to late fall.
It's fun to imagine what this place will be like in a few years. We've just gotten started.
Hello and welcome to Great Gardening. I'm your host, Sharon Yung. Thank you for joining us for our first show of 2025. Tonight, we have a special hour-long episode. It's still winter, but that does not mean we can't help you prepare for the growing season with helpful tips and tricks. As usual, we have our garden experts with us. They are horticulturist and educator Bob Olen and garden professional Byrns Erickson. We want to hear from gardeners across our region who have questions for our experts. We have phone volunteers from the daughter of the American Revolution here to receive your questions this evening. Call locally at 218-788-2844 or simply email us at ask@pbsnorth.org. We're taking questions throughout the show, so call or email us now. Tonight's program is also part of our spring fundraiser. A membership with PBS North gives our viewers an opportunity to support great gardening, PBS North, and a host of other programs we broadcast. Donations can be sent in using the same contact information on your screen. Let's begin tonight's show with a look at the weather in our region. Oh,
Ice is melting.
I'll be ready for that ice to go away.
It's going. It's going quickly. That's amazing.
It is.
There's your
There we go.
No, there's nothing like the sound of like a flowing creek or just even the birds. I've been hearing the birds chirping every day.
Absolutely. No loons yet.
No, I know. Right, a little too early.
It's going to take a while.
Yeah.
grass.
Yeah, no,
Brown grass, green soon.
It'll be so
right?
green so quickly.
and the parks are getting ready.
Yeah, we lost that snow just in a couple of days, didn't we?
It seemed to get absorbed, though.
Yeah.
I was surprised.
Yeah, there's a little frost in the ground, so we'd
Yeah.
like to get as much of that absorbed as possible. A little dry
Yeah,
coming into
yeah.
fall last year.
But it didn't seem to run off as quickly.
And of course, I've got the bags at the Rose Garden. Marvelous, all the volunteers that help bag things
It's
up.
incredible.
Yep. And you can compost those leaves right in that bag if you like, if people are doing this pillow pack like that.
Very nice. So now we're going to discuss the current seasonal weather trends and what that means for the early growing season. Bob?
Yeah, we don't know what it means. I took a look at some of Noah's predictions, and you know, it's real interesting. For the first time, they're saying we're just going to have a very average season, which actually isn't bad for us. We shouldn't have temperature extremes. In the last several years, you know, we really haven't had those intense warm temperatures. They are going to get them in the southwest again, so we can be thankful we live in the great Northland. Moisture should be adequate. So there's nothing really too phenomenal. It looks like a very average year, but we all know that averages are deceptive, right? Just like last year, we had a lot of rain early and then it got very dry. Turned out to be an average year. So we have to be ready for just about everything. But I think we're looking forward to a real good growing season ahead. Would you think?
Well,
that's the
yeah,
case?
we have to be optimistic, don't we? We do.
We do.
It's going to be great. It's going to be great.
Coming from a farm background, you always have to be optimistic, and you never really know what to expect, but it's going to be very fine. Our seasons, it's real interesting because we're not getting those real intense warm temperatures. We're getting warmer nights. We always have had the daylight. We got a little bit more of an extended growing season. So actually, it's all working in our benefit and our favor right now for this far north.
Yeah, I think people will be ready for an average. It's good. Nothing extreme.
Yeah, average is going to be okay.
Yes. Yeah, that's great. Well, thanks, Bob. Let's get back to some more viewer questions. I know a few folks have been wondering how soon can we start growing things? Like, you want to talk a little bit about that?
You know, right now, if I was to start something, I would start celery and peppers. Peppers they take a really long time, but it's a good time to start them because of day length. It makes a big difference for them on day length, but I would be starting those now, or at least quickly.
Right. For me, it's onions because you
Right.
mentioned day length.
You can never get enough onions.
Yes.
I love it.
Actually, they're becoming a health food right now. The
Yeah.
allicin that's in onions, the same thing that's in garlic, and we like to start them early. They grow very slowly, as you mentioned with peppers. And we want those really out early May so they can take advantage of the lengthening days, because with a long day onion, that's what forms
That's
the
what you
bulbs.
want.
So we really got to get those started.
Yep.
And they're fun to
Yep,
grow.
yep,
too.
yep, yep.
Sure.
But you still would have a chance with bulbs if you didn't quite get them.
Oh yeah, you have
ready.
lots of options. You
Yes,
can put
yes.
transplants in, you can put
Yes.
the small bulbs, the sets in, so you have lots of options with onions.
Yeah, that's great. Well, thank you. Keep sending in those questions. And right now, we're going to talk a little bit about winter hardiness zones. What are they? What do they mean for us? Let's talk about that.
Yeah, getting through the winter, of course, is critical. And anytime you're selecting any kind of a tree, shrub, perennial material, number one, will it grow and will it survive our winter? So that's why we've got this marvelous zone maps that have been developed by the U.S. Department of Agriculture. They revise these every 10 years. These are average temperatures. And for us in Minnesota and Wisconsin, we're really looking at these 5 zones, 3A, 3B, and they're the temperatures. Minus 35 to minus 40 is going to be the coldest in the most northerly part of our viewing region, all the way down to zone 5, which, as you can see there, that's minus 15 to minus 20. We are not really zone 5 in Duluth. We're zone 5 in the Bayfield area because of that wonderful peninsula that extends out into Lake Superior, and then down in the Twin Cities. So we've got maps and zones. The U.S. Department of Agriculture does a real nice job on their website. You can put in your zip code and it will flash back your winter hardiness zone. So both Minnesota, Wisconsin in this case, and then Minnesota, which we have a very similar map. We used to have a lot of zone 2. Now the zones are just about absolute temperature. They go from the Arctic, zone 1, all the way down to 14, which is in the Caribbean, and all of the temperatures in between. But that's all they refer to. It's an average, a 10-year average of the minimum temperatures over that period of time. They were just revised 2 years ago, so it's relatively current. We lost all zone 2 in northern Minnesota. So we're now just zone 3 and 4 basically in this area.
And you said they update those every 10 years.
They will update them in a 10-year average. That's correct. So we've got another 8 years to go and see what the next 10 years bring. But there are several other factors in addition to just absolute temperature. So you want to think about these things. First and foremost, you got to have something that survives. If in fact you're not sure about the hardiness of your material, it's not just temperature, but temperature fluctuations. We can have warm periods, cold periods. The old January thaw seems to be occurring in December, January, and February, where we get the fluctuating prevailing winds are really critical for winter hardiness, and the relative humidity of those winter winds. So if we have a lot of dry winds, they tend to dry out material. The sun exposure on your plants, you want to minimize that in the south. Something that people should really think about is soil moisture. Particularly, we've had warm falls. You want that soil to be moist if you need to water in the fall. Even if you think the tree's dropping its leaves, let's get good moisture down in the soil. That's going to help it get through the winter. And then another thing you want to think about, if in fact you're questioning whether or not your plant material is really hardy, make sure that you encourage quality growth through the entire previous year's season. You want to minimize insects, disease. You want to make sure it isn't drought stress. You want a good, healthy tree coming into the fall. So there's a lot of those things to consider for winter hardiness in addition to the absolute cold temperatures, which you can't do too much about it anyway. So with plant selection, here's some thoughts. Again, you want to make sure that you select plant varieties that are appropriate for your zone. So if you're buying something that's labeled zone 4, don't really try to plant it in zone 3 unless you're going to protect it. And you can do all these things, protect from the wind with windscreens, wraps, shelter belts of other trees. Be very conscious of the quality growth, or perhaps plant it someplace where you're protected by a structure, a garage, a house, or something like that, protecting again from the north and west winds. So if you're going to cheat a little bit on the zones, you're not sure if it's really going to be dependably hardy, then you have to look at all these other issues. And then people don't quite understand this, but if you're going to plant an apple tree, we're concerned about this time of year we get sun scald, so we want it on a north-facing slope. That slope runs from the south at the high end down to the north, so it gets protected from that winter sun, which in the south. So those are just a couple considerations for people, in addition to the zone maps that we talked about.
It's important, Bob. I mean, and really, It's hard to want a plant that is not for your zone, but realistic expectations. It's important we pick things that are appropriate for us. Yeah.
Perfect plant, perfect spot.
Yeah.
That's right. And plant material, because supply and demand is getting expensive.
Yes.
So if you're going to plant an apple tree, you want it to last 50 years, not maybe 2 seasons.
Right.
So you got to be conscious of your plant selection for sure.
Thank you, Bob. All right, next up, we're going to take a look at a magnificent flower garden from the Monses family in Island Lake, Minnesota.
This is our 7th year here on Island Lake, and we bought this property primarily because of being on the lake, but it was a mess. There was 1 spirea and 1 hosta on site and absolutely nothing else. There was about 20 feet of grass in the front and 20 feet of grass in the back, and other than that it was chest-high weeds. So it was a huge job to get that eradicated first and then put in what I wanted. We have 350 feet of frontage and a little over 3 acres here on the lake, most of it being on the other side of the lake and woods, and we've chosen to leave it that way. And about 1.5 acres on this side of the lake, which has pretty much been over-gardened. Well, the house is very close to the road, and that was one thing, was the idea of being on the lake. What you come here for is peace and quiet and privacy, and the cars are very close. And of course, everybody slows down to see what you're up to. So that was the first area we worked on, was establishing some privacy between us and the road. The lake being so huge, even if there are a lot of people on the lake, it's so large you rarely see a boat, and we've got quite a bit of property between us and the lake, so it is very peaceful and quiet and private. When the water is at its normal point, which it is right now, we only have about 3 foot of beach, so we don't have a nice big sandy beach, which I really wanted for my grandchildren. So I asked my husband to build a sandbox for the grandkids so they'd have sand to play in, and I came home to a 15 by 15 foot hole in the ground that was 4 foot deep. So we have plenty of sand now, but it's not natural. Because the whole property was overgrown and chest-high weeds, at some point you get tired of just completely eradicating it before you start like a formal garden. So what I started doing little by little was just adding perennials to the existing weedy areas, and then popping in annuals for color, and then as I had energy and time, pulling the weeds out from in between. So it's still a little rough and woodland looking, but I'm perfectly okay with it that way. Well, we have a lot of shade in the woodland area, and I did a stepping stone path, but I was never happy with what it looked like in between. So I started pulling out bits of moss here and there in the woods and tucking them between the stepping stones until I ended up with a mossy stepping stone path to the lake. In addition to that, we had an old patio that was there from the original cabin from the 1950s, and having not being taken care of, it started growing moss. And my friends were all like, "You're gonna power wash that off, aren't you, or kill it?" And I said, "You know, I kind of like that moss." So I decided to start mixing up batches of moss with like buttermilk and kind of brushing it onto the exposed concrete until I got a complete mossy patio. And I love it. It's soft underfoot and it looks lush because it's so pretty green.
Thank you, Gifts, for your support. Now let's get to some more of your questions. Shirley in Floodwood would like to know, can you trim your old lilac bushes right now?
I wouldn't, because the buds are set in the fall, and so cutting them back now, then you're going to lose a lot of those buds. I mean, unless you're really paying attention and you don't mind losing a lot of the buds, I wouldn't do it now.
Great answer. It's not going to hurt the plant,
No.
but you're going to lose all the blooms. So let them bloom and then cut them back. But prune every year. Too many people let them go too long, and then they get long and leggy and woody.
Okay. Tom in Washburn would like to know what he can do to prepare the garden bed for raspberries.
Well, the first thing he can do is get rid of all of the wild raspberries in the adjoining area, because they carry all the virus, and that's really the downfall of a raspberry patch. So clean out all the wild raspberries, and then I think weed-free. They're going to last a long while, and make sure it's weed-free. Do a soil test. If you're going to be tilling that up, you got to get phosphorus and potassium really down in the ground, because that has to be put in the ground. It doesn't leach real readily from the surface. So phosphorus and potassium, weed-free, and then eliminate all the native raspberries.
For size, because it'll bring down your size of your cultivars too.
Absolutely.
Jess in Cotton would like to know what type of willow will grow in Cotton, Minnesota.
Well, a lot of the willows are very hardy. We could start with the pussy willow.
Yeah,
Sea
right.
legs,
But
so-
again, we're going to go back to site selection. If it's not a wetter site,
Right.
they're not going to thrive as well. So you're going to need the correct site
Yeah.
selection.
They're a little different. Most trees, you'd like a little drier, a little better drainage, and these will do quite well. So there are a number of them out there that I think there's a prairie willow, and there's the weeping willow, and then there's of course, the pussy willow. So he's got quite a few to choose from.
Great. So now we're going to take a look at how seed saving, starting, and choosing the best seeds impacts your garden.
Okay, so I brought a few things to choose from. Seeds, if you haven't done them before, sometimes it's nice to start with an easier seed. Marigolds, tomatoes, some of the bigger seeds are easy to start. So when you start them, first you start with a good soil mix. And your soil mix should be fine perlite, fine peat, or peatless mix. That's fine for the seeds so that it has a good base for them to get started on. And then when you're selecting your seeds, there's really good seed vendors or businesses out there. I love Seed Saver. They have a wide variety. They have organic seeds. If you're doing, a lot of people, if you're going to start seeds or you're going to start a vegetable garden, want a organic garden seed. And then you can start with first you have your soil, then you have your containers, and you can use almost anything as a container. You can use an old egg carton if you can afford eggs. And then you make sure it has some drainage in the bottom if it's the foam ones. But if you just make sure that you have drainage, and any vessel will do. But if you sometimes pick something that is too big, your seeds can get too wet too quickly. So a smaller vessel, a smaller size, or putting multiple seeds in that vessel, and then you can wait for the germination on all of them. But so then you start with your container, you start with a good soil mix, you start with a quality seed, and then you can set your seed, you can put your seeds in, and they say that you're supposed to moisten your soil, and you can. And the benefit to moistening your soil is the seed will kind of stick to it, because once you then put your seeds in, like this is a seed tray, a typical seed tray for us, and it has 512 seeds in it, and this is a begonia, fibrous begonia, which is nothing I would start. This would be great to start now, is a begonia, but these guys are like dust. The seed size on these is very, very small, and they're kind of difficult, and they take a long time, and you've got to watch your moisture, and you because they're slow. Because a lot of times with them being slower, then you can get algae on top, and you can get fungus gnats. So you got to watch that.
How long did that take, Deb?
This one, this was at least probably 5-6 weeks to get to true leaves.
Okay.
And we'll let it sit in this. Some people say when you're transplanting and you get true leaves, you can transplant. You can let them get better. You can let them bulk up in the seed tray also, so that they're not quite as fragile, and they can get a better start once you transplant them out. And so then after that, hopefully you get really good germination. And I really like, if you're starting now, a nice size seed is the Morning Glory seed, and it's a really good bigger seed, easy to handle, easy to start. My opinion is if it's a bigger seed that it germinates quicker. And my opinion also is we like to, the size of the seed, we go twice as deep as the size of the seed. So when we do the begonias, we don't put any cover on them. We don't do anything with them. And this is a morning glory, and I love this morning glory. It's called Grandpa Ott. It was Seed Savers. If you go to Seed Savers and read the story about Grandpa Ott, their Grandpa Ott came from Germany with this seed. Wow. And so that's what started their business, and it's a great company, and they have lots of organics. And on every seed packet also, it'll tell you what your germination rate is and what you can look forward to for numbers.
Great.
And then you're germinating.
Oh, yeah. Well, we're taking a little look at, I like to, if you want to save seed, and if you've got seed left over from last year, it's important that you get good results. So we like to do a little what we call a germ check. This is the poor man's germ check process, and I like to just line out about 10 seeds on a kind of a package here. You can see this a little bit. The seeds are going to run right around. There we go. And I like to do 10 because I want to get a percentage. These actually I had to do twice. I tried it 2 weeks ago, and they germinated so fast they were already off and gone. This is about 5 days here, so you can see we had about 100% germination of this. Just about all the seeds germinated. So that was last year's seed that was carefully stored. If you're going to store seed over the winter, cool and dry is the answer. And here's my method, just a quart jar that I will put a pillow pack of evaporated or dried milk in there, or you can use silica gel to pull the moisture out, throw it in the fridge. So if you have your real valuable seed, and some of the new hybrid seed is very expensive, or I like to save some seed like tomatoes because we're so far north that a lot of the seed just goes away. The demand isn't large enough so that all of a sudden these great varieties for us disappear. So I'll order twice as much, and then with the idea of carefully saving it dry and cool in the fridge.
Yeah, don't take for granted, right? Like how to really care for the seeds
That's
before we
right.
plant them.
That's right.
That's great. So let's get back to the Monza's family in Island Lake, Minnesota, and wrap up our tour of their lovely garden.
I've always liked little things that catch your interest here and there. So I've collected kind of little oddities. Like I have 2 flamingos on my property, which my brother, who lives right down the road, absolutely detests my flamingos. He said they belong in Florida, not Minnesota. They should be loons. I came home one day, my flamingos were missing. Couldn't find them anywhere. Turns out my brother hid them, and it took me a month to find my flamingos. He'd done it well enough. Other than that, they're just little whimsical things that I pick up here and there, and a couple of them, like my set of 4 foxes, I move on like a weekly basis. Kind of fun for that little area kids to see what the foxes are up to. When you kind of run out of areas to garden on the ground, of course, you move to planters. And again, what I like to do with a planter is maybe add it to a spot where I'm not getting the color that I want. So I'll just put in a planter pre-planted, and boom, I got a spot of color. I can move it if that area brightens up and adds more color, and put it somewhere else. I love to create beautiful areas to sit and enjoy the garden. Unfortunately, as my husband says, you never sit down. So they're there primarily for friends and company, and the occasional Friday evening after dinner when we sit down and have an adult beverage. Well, I have a degree in horticulture, and that's where it all started. I went back to school when I was in my 30s, when my daughters became college age, and they also went to school. And I always wanted to be a landscape designer. I had fiddled with doing design, with like tracing around quarters and nickels and dimes for shapes, and I thought I need to go to school and learn how to do it right. I did landscape design for about 20 years in Minneapolis area, and then when we retired up north, I ran into my old boss from the cities, who now runs a greenhouse up here, and I now work for him. So a lot of what I bring home is because I love it so much at work, I can't go home without it. And my beds are all pretty packed because of that reason. It's, like I said, once things start blooming, they're in my truck and on my way home before I've even thought about it. My poor husband meets me in the driveway every day. okay, how much do you have today? Sometimes we'll have as many as 30 flats of plants sitting in the driveway, and he jokingly says, we have the most beautiful driveway on Island Lake. I think the most important thing to do is start out small. And when you're comfortable with having the area, the small area, the way you like it, then start expanding. Take advice from people who garden and people at the garden centers, but also listen to yourself. If it's a plant you love and you love where you plant it, you're gonna love your gardens. Don't worry about being too perfect about them. Sometimes it being a little bit of a hot mess is a good thing. One other thing I'd like to say, and I see this a lot at the greenhouses, people tend to come in and they only want to buy a perennial that's in bloom. And if you do that, then you're only going to get the things that bloom that day. Either come to the greenhouse different times during the year or look at things that are not in bloom during that time period. It's really important to me to have things kind of coming and going at all times. And that's what I kind of call it as staging. I always want little pops of color coming and going at all times. Then you don't have to worry about the fact that a peony only blooms for 2 months or a lily for 10 days because something else is taking the stage for it.
Remember, if you have questions, we have answers. Call or email your questions in now. So let's get to a few more. Lee and Carol in Washburn want to know if there's a tomato seed that you can just seed directly in the garden without buying a plant. Have you ever heard of this? And is it feasible for their climate in Washburn?
A cherry tomato all day long. If you want tomatoes and you want direct seed, but the bigger, some better tomatoes, they're going to need to be a transplanter. You can start them yourself early, and that's an easy start for some really good varieties, but a cherry will mature. It's like 45 to 50 days. And you can look at your maturity dates, like an early girl an early girl is going to give you 50 to, I think it's 54 days on an early girl, and you could make it, but you can easily start them in and transplant them out.
Yeah, it's a real interesting question. We have one of our major seed vendors that's pushing a direct seed, but I'm going to have to try some of theirs first to see if, in fact, they'll make it in our short season. Tomatoes are valuable. I'd be starting mostly from transplants with the exception maybe of some of the cherries. But there's some new innovation coming, so we are going to take a look and see what they got.
Yeah, test it out. Dean in Duluth has a 20 by 40 garden, wants to know how to do a soil test that size. Does he do it by himself, or does he need to take it in somewhere, and what would the cost be? And do they test one part or every 5 feet?
Oh, that's really a good question.
Yeah, it is. It's thorough. Yeah.
And we might do a program and show people actually how to do that.
How they do the test. And
20 by 40, 800 square feet. He should take maybe, get yourself a clear plastic pail, no aluminum or galvanized, because that can throw the tests off. There are a lot of metals we're looking for here. So clean plastic, and then take several subsamples, not on the surface, but 3 to 5 inches. Take a subsample, mix this all together if that whole bed is consistent. In other words, if it all looks the same, it's the same soil, one composite test will do it. And then he wants to send it in. You can send it to University of Wisconsin, University of Minnesota. Get a good quality lab that's certified. In other words, the results could go into court if they had to. So it's good, get a good certified lab, so at least once you've got a good, reliable result. The test costs vary. The basic tests are going to be about $20 now from a university public lab.
Okay, thanks, Bob. So keeping our eyes on the future, we're going to discuss what we're most excited about this year.
Okay, I'm excited. There is a brand new petunia, and it is the Firefly petunia. And yep, these are the pictures that we took. It glows in the dark.
Those are your films,
Those are my
right?
petunias. Those are all my pictures. And the bloom and the bud both light up. And it was Time Magazine's invention of the year for 2025. And it's very cool. I mean, it's a white petunia, and classically white petunias are a little bit slower growing. These are, and they need they would need at least 8 to 10 hours of sun every day to get a good glow in the evenings. And it needs to be really dark for it to glow at night, but it needs good fertilization. It needs, we do a time released, and we also like to do, when we do the water soluble, we like to water it way down and make it the lightest blue, but yet so that you can see the blue color. We use the blue one. And that we like to use every time we water so that you have consistent feed all the time. Because these guys, classically, whites are slow in any genera, that they are going to be the slowest and the weakest. But this is exciting. They feel like it's going to be great for your events, evening events, like a wedding, or if you were on a lake and you had it out on a dock and it just glowed. But you're going to want to keep this protected because these will not be cheap.
They're GMO, right? Like they
yeah.
were created.
Oh yeah, they're created with mushrooms. They're crossed with a mushroom that is fluorescent or glow in the dark, and so it's really cool. It's exciting. That's something fun for this year.
Now you said they're not going to be cheap, but will they save on your light bill?
Right.
There
Well,
you go.
that's a lot of the talk. They think that the municipalities are going to use some of them in their big pots,
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
and that it could be kind of cool for tourists and things to
fun.
see it.
It's beautiful. All right, it's time for a few more viewer questions. Bob in Duluth wants to know how and what time of the year is best to trim hydrangeas.
Oh, that's a question we get often. It all depends on the hydrangea, of course. Hydrangeas will either set their buds in the fall or they'll set them in the spring. So if they're setting them in the fall, then you're going to prune them, as soon as they get woody or very early spring, but you only prune back till you see that nice plump bud, because that's what's going to give you the leaves and the flowers. If it's some of our old-fashioned varieties that are going to bloom later in the season and bloom on what we call new wood, then you just prune them right down to the ground. We like to leave them up for winter interest, of course, and they hold some snow, which is good for winter protection. So as soon as the snow melts in the spring, cut them right to the ground, and then they will regrow from the roots. So that's hydrangeas that grow on new wood compared to old wood. The sneaky thing is some are a little bit of both. So you have to kind of take a little look and see what's on the plant. Look for those nice thick buds. Don't prune off any kind of a bud.
And Dr. Armitage just came out and said that you should prune them when they're done blooming. Shape them when they're
Shape
done
them up.
blooming. If you have a bunch of different ones and you're not sure about the
sure.
variety
Yeah.
and how they were bred, that it is the easiest way to encourage.
Yeah. They become extremely popular.
Oh, and there's
and
so
one of
many.
our major producers that came up with the Endless Summer series, the Endless Summer itself wasn't the best in that series, but everything that followed it was. We're actually going to have a talk on that in our spring gardening meetings on the hydrangeas.
And more to come.
The new varieties that are out there. They're fun.
Always new ones. Yeah.
They're great.
Jean in Iron River wants to know if a pear tree that is 2 years old had a deer snap off the top 1.5 feet, will it come back?
It's not going to be dead.
It's a pear tree.
No. And it's the leader. I mean, if it's only 2 years old, depending on the stock, it's probably the leader that it snapped. And it will be ugly for a while,
Yep.
but it will live.
And then it will live, and then the lateral, what you'll want to do is train it. So you want
yep.
some of those lateral branches to come up to the top, put a stake in the ground and a zip tie or something, get
Encourage
that
it
going
to, yeah.
vertical so that you have
Okay.
a central leader again.
Yep.
We just don't want to let it spread. It's not structurally strong. So try to get one of the laterals into a vertical position.
Yeah, so there's hope, Jean.
Yeah.
Yep.
Tom in Cromwell had an apple tree that died 2 winters ago. Okay, he sees new shoots coming from the base. Can the shoots be separated?
Oh,
Well,
Why would
yeah,
you want to?
Yeah, they're crab trees. Yeah, my rootstock is.
all of our apples, for the most part, are grafted, and they're grafted for hardiness and other considerations onto crabapple stock for winter hardiness. So he's just going to get crab apples, and they're never going to be structurally strong. I really think you want to prune at ground level and start again.
Oh, really good question. Thank
Good
you for
question.
the answers. So let's take a look at the local dirt. If you would like to be featured in the local dirt, please submit your garden images to ask@pbsnorth.org. Those photos really get me really excited for spring. And if you're interested in being featured on the local dirt, email ask@pbsnorth.org with photos of your garden. Now we're going to take a look at a new online companion to our show, Great Gardening Seeds.
They're like pets, my plants. They are living. I care about them. I check on them. I don't think I could live without gardening.
So the slender leaf mountain mint is one of our favorite plants. It's got so many good qualities. It's one of the best plants in the garden for pollinators.
Eating your own produce and your own honey that you helped produce gives you a great satisfaction.
Gardening has always been something that has been in my life. My mom had a garden. It was just a cool thing. We were just always running around with fresh produce in our hands and garlic chives hanging out of our mouths.
Again, what a great collection of thank you gifts for your support. Let's take a look at our community calendar and a couple more viewer questions if we have time.
Just want to mention Spring Gardening Extravaganza coming up end of March, March 29th. Going to try something different this year, Better Gardens for a Better Life. It's an integrated approach to gardening your way to a happier and healthier life. Going to look at the human microbiome from a gardener's perspective. We've got a mental health expert that's going to talk about the benefits of gardening. We have an individual that's going to talk about managing your soils to improve the quality and taste of your vegetables. And another individual, a professional, that's going to talk about ergonomics and use of the body properly for lifelong gardening. And then 14 workshops, including one on hydrangeas. So there's going to be a little bit of everything for everybody, whether you're growing plants or vegetables. That's in Duluth at the depot. And then following week, we're going to do one up at Mount Iron. The Spring Gardening Spectacular looks similar. The program is similar, but a little bit different. So once again, you can get more information on the St. Louis County website, and I'll give you all the registration information there as well. Both are going to be great days. Get in if you want. We filled up both last year, and we would anticipate the same thing this year.
Great, so register. And thank you so much for joining us this evening for our special kickoff to the 2025 season of Great Gardening. We hope tonight's episode has inspired you, whether you're planning your spring garden, trying out new techniques, or simply enjoying the beauty of gardens across the Northland. A huge thank you to our viewers and to our volunteers from the Daughters of the American Revolution for making this evening possible. And of course, a special thank you to you, to our gardening experts, Bob Olen and Deb Byrns Erickson, for sharing their time and expertise. We'll see you next time with even more tips to help you grow a beautiful and successful garden this year. From all of us here at Great Gardening and PBS North, thank you so much for watching and having a wonderful evening. Good night.